Welcome to episode 351 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. And Bridget and Scott, the Bruins are 6 out of 7 preseason games into their preseason schedule. And last night in Quebec City, they certainly looked like a team that's looking ahead to the regular season. We'll discuss over the next hour or so, while that's understandable, not always acceptable.
Yeah, it's a frustrating game to watch, like as a fan, but also as media or as an analyst, where you see, it's a team wide stinker, and for the guys who are guaranteed to be on the team, all right, whatever, like they'll move on, they'll go to practice Friday and get ready for opening night on Tuesday down in Florida. But for the guys still battling for a roster spot, like you can't just have an off night because everyone else above you in the lineup has an off night. Like this is your chance to do something to separate yourself. And it might be a stretch to say no one really did, but I really don't think very many guys did. I mean, Patrick Brown has nice goals, so that helps. That he was decent outside of that. I thought Justin Brazeau had a pretty good game. He was involved offensively, helped create some chances. Jeffrey VL dropped the gloves and was in the middle of some scrums in the first period, but I don't think I noticed him much the rest of the night. Like, just not too many guys who really helped themselves out in that game.
No, the fourth line had most of the positives, and Max Jones had a nice hit at one point. But like mostly, I was noticing the fourth line for just doing the basic stuff right, and then the rest of the lineup, you couldn't help but notice the offense was just not there, and things were not clicking. Turnovers all over the place, and some penalties that I think the more penalties you take, you're not allowed. It was. I'm going to change my opening shift, by the way, right now on the fly. Because Fabian Lysell got called up. I was going to talk about Korpisalo, but we'll get to him as well. But Fabian Lysell got that call back up, which we were a little bit skeptical of whether or not Sweeney and everybody was telling the truth about. Like, okay, there's a chance for him to come back up during the last 2 games of the preseason. And so he gets this chance. I personally, based on how he was talking and how they were talking, I don't think he's going to be in the last game. So this was kind of his last audition. And the more penalties that they took, the less time he was on the ice, because he doesn't penalty kill. He didn't have many shifts in that middle period in the second period because they were in the box. So, and then when they're on the power play, they give up a shorthanded goal and like 2 other good shorthanded opportunities. So it's not that he had a bad game. I just don't think that he wasn't able to get going, which is he needed a little bit more time to do that and build on his game like he did in the preseason games that he was successful. So I think, unfortunately for him, the fact that it was kind of a snoozer, it was a very boring game, did not play into what he would have needed to show off what he could do. And I know before the game, he spoke to the media and said, I want to force their hand. Like, I want to make it a tough decision on them. But when everybody else was kind of having a down night, and it just felt like the whole vibe of that game was just a little bit slow and just a little bit meh. It doesn't help, right? Like the team vibe definitely did not help him in that situation. So we'll get your opinion on that later. But Brian.
Sure. So for my opening shift, it's, again, as I said off the top, it's the preseason, all right? And I'm not going to sit here and overreact to the results of the preseason, but I don't want to act like it's completely meaningless, because it does indicate to potentially how the Bruins will be ready to start the regular season. In particular, I'm a little bit concerned about their offense as it pertains to the early part of the regular season, especially with the uncertainty of Jeremy Swayman in the lineup. Obviously, currently not under contract. So a good start is imperative for Boston. And I'm not so concerned about the bottom 6. What I'm a little bit concerned about is the top 6. And the reason I say that is because Brad Marchand is coming off of 3 surgeries this summer, and he's played only I believe, one period of hockey in the preseason, and then he's been kind of in and out of training camp sessions with illness or non-contact jersey to start camp. So he might take a little bit to get going. Who's playing on that line with Brad Marchand and Charlie Coyle? To Bridget's point, it doesn't seem like it will be Fabian Lysell based off of not having a strong finish to camp. Is it Morgan Geekie? Maybe, but they still got to form that chemistry. Speaking of chemistry, the top line, uh, Elias Lindholm, David Pastrnak, and Pavel Zacha.
I think you mean chemistry when you talk about that line.
Thank you, Bridget. Chemistry,
Mhm.
right, as David Pastrnak
Chemistry.
says. Yes. Obviously, Pastrnak is out there trying to get his touches, trying to just get in the rhythm of things. Elias Lindholm is he missed the first half of camp games. He's getting ready to acclimate to a new system, all that stuff. So I understand that they're not going to be clicking all cylinders in preseason. Guys are trying to probably reserve themselves and not get injured and all that stuff. But it still hasn't been an encouraging couple of weeks of games for the top 6 players. So when you're talking about playing the Florida Panthers in less than a week's time, are they just going to flip the switch? Maybe. But that's why I'm a little bit concerned because I have to see it.
Yeah, that top line, they had a couple really nice plays off the rush, and it's like you would expect that, right? Like those guys should be able to make plays when they have space, and they did, and it looked pretty good. So, now it's the in zone play. Now it's okay. Once you get that first chance off the rush, what are you doing to keep plays alive, keep cycling, keep going? And it feels like that's really where, they need to find the chemistry, and that's probably going to take a little bit of time. Um, so this I can tie this into my opening shift because one reason that they need to get going offensively is that they're going to be starting the regular season without their number one goalie. And I feel like the biggest, look, there's something new kind of every time we log on. And I feel like the biggest talking point over the last 24, 36 hours regarding Jeremy Swayman, as we sit here Friday morning, has been in reaction to this new Amazon documentary series, Face Off, which dropped on Friday, so people can watch it right after you listen to us if you'd like.
Yeah, you're gonna have to wait till after you listen to us. Yes.
Right.
Don't tune out right now.
No. Don't do that. And then listen to all of WEI's programming throughout the day, and then you can tune in to Amazon.
Yes, right.
So they leaked, they gave some teaser clips to media ahead of time, and one of the ones they shared, good marketing, was Jeremy Swayman talking about his contract and arbitration during last year's playoff run, and then immediately after the Bruins season ended, and he is again talking about his arbitration hearing and how he wrote down all the things that were said about him and he used it as motivation. And he, approached the playoffs like, every game could be his last because he didn't know what would happen with his contract situation, but also said, I want to do everything in my power to be a Bruin for a long time. And a lot of the reaction I've seen is he just needs to get over it. Like, why is he thinking about his arbitration hearing during the playoffs? That was 7 months earlier at that point. And I get a normal human being reacting that way because I think we all feel like there are things in our lives that at some point you just have to get over, no matter how slighted you felt.
I don't know. I can hold on to stuff for a long time. I can really hold on to it.
But I actually have a little bit of, Bridget, maybe you're wired more like a pro athlete then, because my reaction to that is pro athletes are crazy and goalies are especially crazy, and they look for every little kernel of disrespect that they can use to motivate themselves. So I'm not at all surprised that he still is referencing that arbitration hearing and things that were said about him in the playoffs. Oh, like, is he distracted? I don't know. Did you watch the playoffs? He was the best player, not just the best goalie. He was the best player for 2 rounds. So, obviously it wasn't distracting him. It didn't take away from his play. It seems to have motivated him. I almost think, like, now, if you're still gonna let the personal interfere with contract negotiations, I actually think it's, like, a different thing. Like, at some point, you need to get serious about the business of negotiating a contract. But in terms of what a player uses for motivation before a game, during the playoffs, whenever, like, use whatever you can. Michael Jordan was famous for that. Like, you know, like, go watch the Last Dance again. Like, every little slight, like, Gary
And I took
Payton,
that personally.
right? Like, Gary Payton just said, "I think I played pretty good defense against them," and Michael Jordan was like, "That motherfucker! Like, what an asshole!" And it's like, I don't know, like, they're psychos.
Yeah, and
So
the timing of it being the playoffs that he's talking about, it makes sense that you're trying to find that extra motivation and extra gear. And I mean, we've all been there, right? Like, there's a term revenge bod because when you're mad at your ex, you want to, you want to throw it in their face, and he's doing this in terms of he's throwing it in their face. Yeah, I am that good. Like, I'm going to be successful. This is what what I can do, and using it as a chip, I don't think is a bad thing. It has clearly continued to be an issue in terms of bridging a relationship. And you wonder, like, how bad was that arbitration? We obviously don't know what was said in the room necessarily, but clearly he wrote it down. And, sometimes things are insulting and you remember those. It sticks with you.
so just s- but the
Maybe he'll play
arbitration.
better. Maybe he'll play better if he gets a bad contract and he'll just be like, this is BS. I'll show them I was worth 8 mil or whatever, or 10 mil.
So the comments that Jeremy made in this Amazon series, right? It was during the 2024 playoffs, correct?
Yeah.
Referencing arbitration following the previous season, correct? Arbitration that which camp initiated the hearings?
His.
Okay. And the playoffs run, which he made these comments, the following off season, did the Bruins take him to arbitration?
They did not.
They did not. Okay. Did they trade away a former Vezina winning goaltender?
Yes, they did.
They did. Okay. So it seems to me that
After the first arbitration hearing, did they take a 1-year deal instead of a 2-year deal? Yes,
they
they did.
did. They did. So there's many circumstances you can point to where the Bruins are absolutely showing believability in Jeremy Swayman, because when they had arbitration last year, as we just talked about, which the player initiated or brought them to, not the team. At the time, he hadn't been the guy in the playoffs. Now you can sit here and have revisionist history on the 2023 series with the Panthers and say that he should have played earlier than Game 7. I was saying that, but the fact of the matter is he didn't play until Game 7. I thought he played well, but they lost the game. And in previous playoff runs, the net was all marks. Now he might be vengeful that in those postseason runs, the year prior against Carolina and then the following year against Florida, that Allmark did have the net. Sure, maybe he's bitter about that. But as it pertains to the Amazon Prime comments, it's just it's a little bit like, buddy, why do you feel so insulted? They didn't take you to arbitration after you proved yourself. So the comments are the arbitration feelings to me are outdated because he's holding them against the previous year's arbitration.
And obviously the Bruins don't feel the same way, and they wouldn't have the same arguments after this season.
It just honestly, guys, I love Jeremy Swayman as a player, and as a person, I've always enjoyed his personality and he's just a gamer. I love what he brings to the table. But if you look at the facts here, the facts are the Bruins have given him an offer, as Scott put out last episode, that allows him to reset the RFA goalie market. They traded away a former Vezina winner in Linus Allmark, indicating to Swayman, We believe in you going forward. You're our guy. They also, to Scott's other point, didn't add the second year of arbitration last year so that he could, in good faith, negotiate this year. That's a mistake by Sweeney because clearly Swayman's agent didn't really reciprocate the goodwill there, the good faith. And yeah, it's just he's so vengeful and so like everybody in the Bruins like hates me or doesn't believe in me. That's so not true. They've picked you going forward. They've offered you at least close to 8 million, now 8 million plus. You know, and they didn't take it to arbitration this year. So I'm just, as I said, I really like Swayman, but at this point, I do think it's a little bit woe is me, and there's really not much to justify that anymore.
Well, the
and
part that concerns
this is where
me,
like I separate for games, for your play, use whatever you want as motivation, interpret it however you want. We can sit it from the outside and be like, why is he still going on about that? Whatever. If it helps you play well, then use it. But yeah, when you get into contract negotiations, like at some point you can't be like, well, I'm going to keep holding out into the season because of what they said about me in arbitration, 14 months ago. Like, you have a fair offer on the table. Like, it's insane to me if you're sitting there looking at 8x8 thinking that's not fair. And fine, if you want to push for, get it to 8.1 or 8.2 so you can feel like you had one last little victory in negotiations, like, okay, that's kind of what Pasternak did at the end of his. Like, it happens. But, it just, like, it would be crazy to me if he lets personal feelings ruin his time, like, end his time in Boston. Because you have a fair offer on the table, and now it's really just up to you. Like, I said it last pod. I wrote about it. It's on weei.com. Like, you have already if you take 8x8, if you accept that deal today, you've reset the RFA goalie market and pushed, in terms of both money and years, what is possible for an RFA goalie in his mid-20s who has really not had a full season as a number one. If you, it would just be crazy to me if you let the personal feelings like end this and result in you having to go play somewhere else.
The part that was most concerning to me about the quotes that he made in the teaser, because I haven't had a chance to watch the full episodes yet. They just dropped this morning or maybe last night at midnight. So we haven't had a chance to watch it. We're recording this pretty early in the morning. So what was most concerning to me was that he was already saying this might be my last game as a Bruin. When he was when he was talking about the playoff run, like, this might be the last time I have a Bruins jersey on. Like, why were you already thinking that before this offseason even played out? It just, I know he said he wants to be here, but like, it was always a possibility, I guess, after the arbitration thing, that he just thought that maybe this was it. So that to me raised a big red flag. Like, okay, does he really want to get this done as much as he says? Because he was already willing to look at that playoff series as like, oh, this is my final go at it, maybe potentially. So I thought that was a little bit odd.
Yeah, that didn't bother me as much because I think I took that it's kind of just like an acknowledgement of fact that one of the goalies was getting traded, and I think he had seen them during the season try to trade Linus Ullmark, and they weren't able to do it. Ullmark blocked the trade. And I think it would only be natural if Swayman thought, like, well, what if they decide they can't trade Linus Ullmark or they can't get the deal they want for him, so they keep Ullmark and they trade me? Like, so that didn't bother me as, like, I think that was more just a reflection on the fact that he did not have a contract beyond the year, and one of the two of them was going to be gone.
Yeah, I guess it could go that way too. I'll have to. I will definitely. That was episode 3, right? That they're saying that these are in. So obviously, if you're really into what was said, skip right to episode 3 for those Swayman comments.
You know, guys, it's really interesting. This whole situation has become far too public, far too embarrassing, far too ugly. And the more I think about it and the more we talk about it, I can't help but feel as though the majority of this should be the fault of the players' camp. Not so much, not Swayman in particular, because he has an agent, and I'm sure a lot of the leaks have come from him. But if you play this back, okay, and we've spent time already this episode talking about the arbitration hearing that was last year, okay, and clearly he resents that and whatever. But if you look at the situation from the time that the Panthers eliminated the Bruins to now, okay, Boston, we're not going to arbitration. Okay. We're gonna figure out a deal. Boston, they trade Allmark. Okay. We want to sign you, Jeremy. This is very evident. And then here's where it starts to get ugly. It starts to get ugly with the Spit and Chicklets podcast when Ryan Whitney talks about Boston's initial offer, which has been confirmed at this point through Elliot Friedman and other Boston started with 4 years at like 6.2. Well, Spit and Chicklets is a massive hockey platform across North America and the world for any hockey fans. And that right away made the Bruins appear to be very cheap. They're lowballing him. And then, yes, he did say Swayman was also asking for the McAvoy contract. But the first thing and the thing that sticks with people is, oh, the Bruins offered him 4 years at 6.2. That's a slap in the face, I think is what it was termed. Well, where's that information coming from? It's coming from the agent. Or the agent's giving it to somebody who's giving it to Whitney, whatever. So the agent starts that. Before that, Swayman goes on the Shut Up Mark podcast and talks about wanting to reset the goalie market. This is all coming out of the players' camp. Long before Don Sweeney went off on Spit and Chicklets, which, probably wasn't well advised. But then certainly the Cam Neely comments, the Bruins were sitting there saying, we haven't said shit. And everybody thinks we're negotiating in bad faith and lowballing the player. And then obviously Neely says what he says and the agent responds. But the agent, his response and just Swayman's comments throughout all this, the whole summer, and they're trying to paint themselves as these victims. And it's like they're gaslighting people and manipulating. And I'm not saying it's intentional by Swayman, but certainly from his agent acting like, we're so disappointed. It's unfair to Jeremy. Look in the mirror. Who was doing this first for a month and a half? So it's annoying that it's gotten to where it's gotten to, and that the players' camp is playing victim when it's like, look, did the Bruins get a little bit unprofessional towards the end here? Yeah, but everybody was playing dirty, and they weren't the first ones to do so.
And by the way, Spit and Chicklets, I saw Biz tweet this, I think it was last night. He was like, is Swayman really telling the Bruins to take 8x8 and shove it up there? You know what? Like, I think they might have switched to being like, oh, that's fair. Like, now that's a fair offer. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think Biz has always been more on that side of like, if it gets to 8x8, that's fair. And what is Swayman doing? Asking for more. But Whitney's the one who is like very pro player. I mean, I think he was involved in the PA when he was a player. Like I get it, but yeah, that I think they have not. The two of them have not been like exactly eye to eye on where they come in on this. Even to the point where like Ryan Whitney was just very open about, I don't like Don Sweeney, and business like, we're pals. Like, I'm not going to badmouth them. So, but yeah, I'm trying to think of what I was going to say. One thing to add here. Fluta Shinzawa had a good interview with Trent Frederick that's up on The Athletic, talking about him getting close to arbitration last year. Obviously, they ended up settling before it actually got to a hearing and signed a new 2-year contract. But when you get that close, because I think they agreed like the day before or 2 days before, you've already exchanged briefs for the hearing. So both sides get to see like what the other side's going to argue. And Frederick basically said like, Yeah, it didn't seem that bad. Like it was business. That it didn't really bother me. And I get actually going into the hearing is different. Like I'm sure that is worse than just reading the briefs, but it was just like such a and like I didn't take it as necessarily like a shot at Swayman of like, oh, he's taking it too personally or anything, but just like a completely different mindset. And like that's how those two are wired, right? Like Frederick Frederick is the fighter on the ice, but he's just very kind of laid back, easygoing, nothing
Yeah.
bothers him off it. Whereas like Swayman is emotional and he has a chip on his shoulder at all times, and he's kind of fiery, like
But I
on
think
and
on
off
the
the ice.
ice, he's calm on the ice, though. That's one of the things about Swayman that
Well,
about his
I
think
don't know.
about
I
it.
mean, he'll get into it. Like a guy getting his crease, he gets into
No,
it
but
with them.
I'm talking about when he has to make plays on the ice. Like he's pretty calm. He's even said before, "Oh, I like shootouts." That's
So,
most people I would consider that to be calm. But yeah,
guys,
off the ice, I guess it's different.
so also just jumping into my mind right now, and one of us mentioned it earlier. It may have been me. I don't know, but like when Sweeney didn't elect to go with the 2 years of arbitration for Swayman last year, kind of extending that olive branch to the Swayman camp, saying, let's get through this year and we'll renegotiate in good faith. He put his trust in Lewis Gross that they would get something done. And he did it a second time this offseason, trading Linus Ullmark. So is it
And
fair?
a third time not taking him to arbitration this summer.
Right, exactly. Thank you, Scott. So is it fair to say that Sweeney, maybe he's blindsided by the fact that Gross is playing this hard with him? Should he be? And if he shouldn't be so surprised, like I hate to pose this simple question, but did he trade the wrong goalie? It would be so much better if this was all going on, knowing you still had Allmark, right? That's the part where it's like, oh, because he's gone. So it's Swayman or it's Corpusalo Bussy. Like it's just, to me, it's like if there was any way Sweeney could have had a gut feeling or any sort of intuition or instincts that it could have played out this way, should he have not traded Allmark, or just something? Could something else have played out where they had more of this insurance policy?
I I don't think he's surprised that they've played hardball because he's dealt with Lewis Gross before. The Torrey Krug negotiations were not pretty and obviously basically ended with them not talking for like a full season before Krug left in free agency. So he knows the agent well. I don't think he was surprised. Uh, Again, I think why he traded Allmark when he did was because Allmark could have changed his no trade list on July 1st, and then you might have been left with no market to trade him if he adds Ottawa to his no trade list. Um,
Better than the option of no goalies, though.
sure, but listen, they picked Swayman, and I think they're right to pick Swayman. Like Swayman did in the playoffs this spring what Allmark has never done in the playoffs. Allmark has had 2 years that he started the playoffs as the number one goalie and could not hold on to the job until the end of the first round. So you now found a goalie who can get it done in the playoffs. That's the guy you pick. And he's younger, he's in his prime. Like I don't fault Sweeney for any of that. Now, I'm saying that because despite all of this and everything that's been said this week, I still think it does actually get done because I think it's still in both parties' best interest to do this. By all accounts, Swayman still wants to be a Bruin. I've said it before. Once he signs an 8-year contract, he doesn't have to talk to Don Sweeney or Cam Neely for 8 years if he doesn't want to. Like, he can just be with his teammates and coaches, and that part of your life is like gone. It's in the background.
Yeah.
So I still think that's ultimately what he's going to want to do. And it just doesn't seem like they're far enough apart on the money that at this point that it should like linger to December 1st or end in a trade. Like we know the Bruins have put 8 years, $8 million a year on the table. Cam Neely told us that. Reports are Swayman is now at Elliot Friedman says 9 or high 8s. Frank Saravalli says 8.5. Like that's a bridgeable gap. You know, once you take a couple days to calm down this week, that should get done. It just should. Like I've been wrong the whole way, obviously, because I thought this was going to be done by the start of camp. So like, what the hell do I know? But I still look at this and I'm like, there's just no possible way they're really going to let this like get completely ruined, right? Like they can't really be that stubborn, right?
Well, they got a goaltender that's keeping a burn book about the whole situation. And on the ice, Scott, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, obviously, the guy to go to is Swayman, right? He's the guy on the ice. But the I don't know, just the mindset of him and his agent all summer, they got a few screws loose, and unfortunately, that's why I'm saying like I was kind of being rhetorical. I knew Sweeney knew that Gross acted this way and negotiated this way, which is kind of why it's like hindsight's 2020. And if he's to sign today, then this whole argument goes out the window. But until he signs, it's just you have to ask the question if there was any chance he knew that Swayman wouldn't sign in Boston or play this or I don't know. It's just because the alternative isn't great, guys. It's not great. If the alternative was Allmark, like, because he was still in the contract for a year, right? But I know it's tough to pin this against people because you do things with the best foot forward, but it's been ugly.
I want to mention this too because I know you've said it's extending an olive branch to have taken that 1-year deal instead of 2 years during arbitration, but we can't lose sight of the fact that means that at the end of that contract, he is still a restricted free agent and he doesn't have the ability to go out into the open market and look for 10 somewhere else and have someone else drive that price up rather than him just saying this is what I deserve. He could have gone and said, say after the 2 years, he would have been unrestricted and he could have been like, well, guess what? Ottawa offered me 10. Are you guys going to match or not? And he has more of a potential to get that money if that's really what he was worried about. So yes, it was an olive branch in that they're like, yeah, we're going to come back and offer you more money when we have more cap space. But at the same time, we're talking about him setting the restricted free agent market, not the unrestricted free agent market, because that market goes higher just because of the fact there's more competition for people to pay. So yes, it's an olive branch, but it also was a way to keep him under team control for another contract. So he's not able to really do much because if they don't want to trade him now, he has to sit out the season. So he loses that leverage that he would have if he was a unrestricted free agent.
Great points.
Yeah. You guys want to pivot to the game or
there's so much meat. I know, on we could keep going for hours. I mean,
yeah,
like, do they end up
4-hour show?
Do they end up on a bridge term, right? Like, do they somehow end up on 4 years? I know both sides. I know Swayman wants 8. I know the Bruins probably. Well, they may have started at 4, but like maybe that's who knows. There's so much here, but because it's unknown, maybe we should just move on. And at this point, Bridget, to your opening shift, and then we can end with the shape they're in to start the year. So Fabian Lysell, at this point, guys, unimpressive first week of camp, really strong second week of camp, gets sent down, comes back up for the game, doesn't really impress. Bridget, you talked about, and it was a great point. Does the energy of the team last night just kind of bleed into everybody, right? Everybody was kind of blah, himself included, but maybe that's a chance and an opportunity to stand out that much more.
It was making me feel blah. I was sitting there watching. I was going, you know what? I'm tired now.
But if the team around you is lethargic and you're anything decent, you'll stand out, especially with his speed. And to your point, he really didn't. So at this point, if he starts the year in Providence, despite how disappointed I was, he got sent down mid-camp. If he's starting in Providence and spends much of the season there, if he doesn't do all there, I can't really begrudge Boston because he hasn't really shown it consistently enough.
Well, what if Mount Patra's not ready for the regular season though? Then there might still be a spot for him.
That's true. That is true. And it seems as though with the season starting on Tuesday and we're recording Friday morning, Patra very well could be on the shelf to start the year.
Yeah, he missed.
Yeah.
They list him as day to day. He missed the last practice. Didn't go to Quebec City. I'm a little bit. I have a bad feeling about it. I don't know, something about the way he took some hits in that third preseason game and comes up kind of like holding his upper body. I'm gonna go back and watch it because I had taken note of it. It was more than once, and he did practice and play after that, but I don't know. He definitely took a hit that caused something this preseason, and your biggest fear is that it was a re-injury of the Army had surgery on, but we're not 100% sure what it was.
Yeah, we'll see. Like, Jim Montgomery does have this habit of saying injuries are day to day, and then next thing you know, Elias Lindholm has missed 2 weeks of camp, or
Yep.
Like Jake DeBrusk before missed a bunch of time after he was supposed to be day to day. Like, I think Montgomery gets out, out ahead of his skis a little bit too much at times with some of these updates.
Could be purposeful, or it could be he's just optimistic.
Yeah, but we'll see. That they're practicing Friday. I'm heading to Warrior right after we're done recording. One last preseason game Saturday, and then weirdly, like Friday is their last thing in Boston until the season starts, because Saturday they're on the road for the preseason, and then they're going out to Florida, and they're practicing in Florida on Monday before they play the Panthers Tuesday night. So they won't be back in Boston until Wednesday, probably back on the ice in Boston like next Thursday ahead of the home opener. So we'll see if we see Patra. But yeah, with Lysell, I think for all of us, like, our biggest gripe was just that he was getting sent down so early and wasn't getting more of a chance. I still don't really fully understand this whole send him down and then bring him back up when he, I guess, still had a chance to make the team. Like, that still seems weird to me because he missed, I think, 2 practices with the Boston Bruins in the process that could have helped him. But regardless, like, he did get another chance. So it's not like that was it for him. They said that might happen, and they did do it. They gave him another chance. And yeah, I didn't really think he did much to take advantage of it. So, like, that was all I wanted, was like, give him a chance, into this final week of camp to see if he could keep building. Kind of flatlined along with most of the rest of the team. But even individually, like, I thought he had a couple plays where he just got knocked off the puck too easily. Now, he did also win a battle in the neutral zone at one point, which is good to see, but it's got, you can't be 1 for 4 in 50-50 puck battles. Like, you got to kind of at least break even on those if you're going to make an impression. So, yeah, right now I think he's on the outside looking in and probably starting the year in Providence. Maybe even if Patra's not ready, because there are, other guys hanging around that, if Lysell wasn't going to be in like their top 12, which I think if you look back at the lineup they rolled out for Tuesday's preseason game, like, that was a pretty good lineup, and it didn't have Patra or Lysell in it. And that was Geeky on the second line, and it was Frederick, Johnson, Brazeau on the third line. And then your fourth line, you have Beecher and Kastelik or locks there. And then, like, either Max Jones or Cole Koepke. So if there's not a spot for Lysell in the top 12, then he's not going to be here, even if Patra isn't ready to go.
So I'm curious what you guys feel about Cole Koepke. And because that fourth line, Kastelik, Beecher, Koepke, Max Jones, whatever combinations they throw out there, I think I don't want to speak for others, but he has just jumped off the page to me all camp. And he strikes me as a guy that could be a great fourth liner, but also kind of has the ability, I feel like, to be a third line guy in a pinch if they need it. I've been really impressed with him. His speed, his aggressiveness on the puck. He hunts pucks. He goes to the net. He has pretty good hands, good shot, smart player. Like I'm very underrated signing for the Bruins. I believe it was this off season, right? I think he may have been in Tampa's system last year, if I'm not mistaken, but he doesn't have much NHL experience. If you look at his I almost said his IMDb, his hockey DB, and he's not an actor.
Is he an actor? What's he in?
But what do you guys make of his game? Because Scott, you mentioned last episode you were very excited to see Max Jones this year of the new bottom six additions, and likewise, because Max Jones was on the shelf to start camp, it gave Cole Koepke more of an opportunity, and all four of those guys, Beecher, Kaslik, Koepke, and Max Jones, I think their fourth line. I mentioned earlier, the top six they're gonna have to just hit the ground running to start the year because the preseason didn't really indicate much to us. But the bottom six, certainly the fourth line, I think is going to provide a lot of energy and pop that they're going to need early on when everybody else is still getting their legs, and Koepke is right in the middle of that.
And they still have Tufty up too. He hasn't been sent anywhere yet as well, so he's another guy that could be competing for that. But
I have not been as impressed with Tufty the last couple games.
I don't know if I just like that he could add that. Like the size of the team is already big, and then he's just like another guy you throw out there, and I don't know. So there's certain parts of his game that I like. I think that he's very aggressive.
I think he's a fourth line call up when they need him. I think he'll probably go down to Providence because the guys we've just mentioned, I think, have just shown more so far.
Yeah, I'm just saying he's still around. As another person that could fill a hole potentially.
So is Patrick Brown. Don't forget about Patrick Brown.
Patrick Brown, who, actually has had a pretty decent preseason.
He has.
He leads that fourth line when he's out there. And because obviously it's a different one than when Kaslik and Beecher. But yeah, I to be honest with you, some parts of the preseason I've thought Brown looked better than Tyler Johnson. Other times I thought Johnson looked better, but Johnson's also out there playing with, he's putting in an easy goal on a great pass by Zacha, and he's out there on the power play. And so he's getting set up for better opportunities, I think.
He also just has he has the credibility. He's a multiple time Stanley Cup champion, and he's proven that he can be a scorer in the NHL. And his role will be lesser than it was back in the day, but it's not Tyler Johnson versus Patrick Brown. There's just there's an NHL ceiling difference there,
I want to bring up too that there's I could see this going where Tyler Johnson just isn't signed like the way Danton Heinen was for a few weeks to start the season last year, and I could see him not being signed until they have enough money till they have the Swayman money figured out. That there's a chance that goes a little bit, the decision doesn't have to be made by opening night as long as he's willing to stick around and be like, you're promising him something. The contract might not necessarily be there opening day, like with Heinen.
So that could happen. I don't really see it. I think this is a little different because last year, I think it was clear that Danton Heinen was going to be on the team, and they just had to sort some things out. Whereas this year, if you're telling Tyler Johnson, we have to wait until the Swayman contract gets done, he's going to be like, wait, okay, so what if you sign him for enough money that you can't afford me?
Yeah,
let's just go still December 1st. Tyler Johnson scored 17 goals last year. He can play in the NHL. So I don't think he's just going to hang around for a month or more with just an indefinite endpoint.
Maybe a deadline if there was a hey.
Yeah, I think it's
2 weeks, then I'm done. But
I think it's more likely if he's going to be on the team, he's going to be signed in the next few days before opening night. Because depending on what he's looking I'm thinking he's signing for $1 million or less, maybe 1.1. Unless the Bruins end up going to 9 for Swayman, they can actually afford that. They'll just have to have 22 guys on the roster instead of the maximum 23. So I don't really think that's that much of an like. I kind of think they're separate things, unless like Johnson's looking for like 1.5 or 2 million, and the Bruins think maybe they're gonna have to go to 9 with Swayman. Like, unless it's something like that, I don't really think they're all that connected.
Also, I realized that we're recording this right before practice, and we expect call ups again, and like transactions haven't been announced, but the way that Montgomery was talking, he said there's more players that went down to Providence that will be up for Saturday's game, so tomorrow's game. So there's a chance there's other guys at practice that we're not talking about right now because we're recording this right before. So I would expect there to be call-ups for Saturday's game.
Just to jump back quickly, because I don't know if I actually got you guys' opinion on Koepke, because I know he spent time at Minnesota Duluth, and Bridget, you're all over the college scene, and Scott, you're familiar with it as well. But is he a player who has surprised you guys that you could see being a regular this year? I know maybe there's probably some gamesmanship as it pertains to the salary cap and one-way contracts and two-way contracts. And I know Swayman's trying to get signed, and Johnson, like you just mentioned, I didn't even think about that earlier. But so maybe there's some intangible reasons why maybe he goes down, but just talk about his play as it pertains to the people around him.
Yeah, I've liked his play this preseason. Like you said it already, but like he's kind of done everything. They've used him in PK situations. He's been aggressive offensively. He's gotten himself in scoring positions. Defensively, I've noticed he's a winger, but I've noticed quite a few shifts where he's been the first guy back and kind of doing the center's work, and has looked like he can handle that. So yeah, a lot to like. And I sort of coming in, I think I kind of had like him and Riley Tufte in the same boat, where it's like, yeah, maybe they surprise and make a push, but most likely they're starting in Providence. And then I thought they both got off to good starts. And this is where like Koepke separates for me, is I think he's kept it going and just continued to play well, if not gotten better. Whereas I think Tufte's fallen off a little bit. So yeah, I definitely could see him making the opening night roster and maybe even being in the lineup on that fourth line. You're right, like he flashes some skill there that you could see him move up to the third line if he needs to. And also keep in mind, like he would need to go through waivers to get sent down. And, when you get these major cut downs ahead of opening night, there aren't a whole lot of waiver claims. So like most guys do clear, but maybe
we need to talk about that too.
But maybe someone else has noticed, like, hey, Cole Koepke's looked pretty damn good this preseason, and puts in a claim on him.
Yeah,
like Tampa, who let him go. Let's get him back over here. But yeah,
I mean, to answer the Koepke question, I think he's fit. He's been a good fit no matter who he's next to, but putting him with Kastelik and Beecher, it would be a fast line. And I think he wouldn't have to be the guy that drives the physicality, because Kastelik can do that. And Beecher is very speedy, so it doesn't necessarily have to be the fastest guy out there either. So I think he's meshed pretty well. And if he makes the team, then it would be well earned.
For sure. And it's just funny because you think back a few weeks ago, this goes to show the impression one can make in preseason, because a couple of weeks ago, Fabian Lysel's first preseason game, everybody was like, oh, he was playing with, nobodies and scrubs. And now it's John Farinacci, who's not a scrub, especially down in Providence. He'll be very effective for them. And Cole Koepke was the other one. And at the time, we were all saying, and Scott even said, he's like, well, Fabian Lysell was the third best player on his line, and Cole Koepke was the best player. And I just think you're going to have some people that earlier on in camp were calling him a scrub just because they didn't know who he was. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's a much more familiar name as the season goes along. By the way, the NHL season officially starts today, 1:00, the Global Series. I think it's the Devils and the Sabres or something like that across Where's that series being played, guys? The opening.
I'm pulling it up right now.
I
Yeah,
think it's
I was muted, but it's in Prague.
okay.
Yep.
Yes, the Devils and the Sabres. So hockey has officially begun.
It's that time of year, guys. Today's my first broadcast too, so it's
By the way,
definitely back.
Bridget, move a little bit to your left and show the YouTube audience your brand new edition,
This
the
is
Hockey East jacket.
my beautiful Hockey East custom made jacket that I bought for this season, and it's got all of the different logos on the back and the Hockey East logo in the middle, and on the arm you can't see it, but it has my name and like a little microphone. So you'll see me in this, you guys. You'll see me in this at the rink at some point. So
most importantly, BU on top.
Yeah. Yep.
And Merrimack on the bottom.
And UMass is over here that I've been covering it with my head, but yeah. I know, Scott, you might not have time to comment on goaltending. If we have like 3
Yeah, I have
left.
to go because I have to get to practice.
Can Brian and I talk about it then?
Go for it.
All right. Bye, Scott. Let us know.
Have a good weekend, everyone. See ya.
See you, Scott.
Look, now there's more room. Now there's more room for my jacket.
What's the logo above Maine, Bridget? Is that? That's not.
That's Holy Cross. So the woman's side has Holy Cross on it.
Okay.
So we added that too because I do both. So we added the Holy Cross as well. I don't know if the men are ever going to end up in Hockey East at some point, but yeah, right now the women are. So that's what that is.
I thought there was a logo I didn't recognize, but yeah. So maybe the women's have a couple more teams than the men's, huh?
They're just the one.
Just the one.
Well, yeah, actually no, they do because UMass Lowell and UMass don't have women's teams, so they have slightly different.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so the next episode we record, which will be Monday, will be we'll know the final roster, right? And then we'll be able to give some predictions, whether it be Bruins, league wide, individual players. So we'll definitely have that on Monday. And was there anything else, Bridget, you wanted to touch on today?
Well, yeah, the Bruins, since we last recorded, claimed Yuri Patera off waivers. He's a goalie, from the Czech Republic, has NHL experience. But I guess he's not with a team yet because of visa issues, but that might just be because they were in Quebec. So like that's a Canadian visa. You're coming to the US. Like I'm not sure if that affected it. So he wasn't able to go up there. Scott will get back to us. I'm sure he'll tweet about if he's with the team now. But trying to come up with some goalie depth.
Yeah, I know. Now he's somebody with some NHL experience, but not a ton. And it was with Vegas, right?
Yeah, I'm pulling up the press release now, but it's just I guess insurance. Yeah, he's played a lot in the AHL. He's played more. He's had, I guess he only had 8 games with Vegas. But it's funny to me. They always end up getting Czech guys. Like, it's always like, oh, we'll just add another. Like in the past, it's been like, I know they don't have Lauko anymore or Nosek, but those guys were Czech guys. We'll just plug them in. So they got Patera. Yeah. And then the other goaltending thing that we didn't talk about with Scott was Korpisalo. I mean, we didn't really talk about the game all that much.
I was going to ask you to jump back to what your original opening shift was going to be. Yeah. So how'd you think he looked last night? I mean, I thought he had some good saves. But again, when a team plays that shitty in front of you, it's really tough to look at the goaltending. And I know I saw somebody somewhere on Twitter. I saw somebody tweet out the video of like the short side goal, and it was like the 4th goal. But I mean, and then you have Senators fans saying, "Get used to this. This is what he is." But I don't know. I mean, look, we all know it's not optimal. And I put out a poll on Twitter recently asking Bruins fans if the Bruins are still contenders. Can the Bruins still contend without Jeremy Swayman? And I listed how the last 10 Stanley Cup champions, half of them won the Stanley Cup with the goalie that didn't even receive Vezina votes in that same season. And now, obviously, it depends how's the rest of the roster, right? Well, so is the rest of the Bruins roster good enough to still be a contender? Not as good of a contender, right? But can they still be a Stanley Cup contender without Jeremy Swayman? When you look at how in the last decade half the teams won the cup without a Vezina caliber goalie that year. And if you're asking me, I think the Bruins defense certainly I think is Stanley Cup caliber. I think their depth is. I think their high end forwards should be. I obviously we all know that they're missing a top 6 winger of elite skill or more elite skill, and that's going to be a deadline acquisition. We all know that. So how do you feel about that? And just with Corpusalo between the pipes, how do you feel right now?
What was the final score on the poll? I'll tell you how I voted
Oh,
because I did vote in this poll.
good question. I probably should have. I probably should have said that, right? I didn't even. It was 59.3% said yes and 40.7%
That's
said
higher than
no.
I would have thought.
Mm.
So maybe people aren't as panicky as I would have assumed
And
based
that's
on not having Swayman.
and that's why I wanted to put that up because you see a lot of people saying like if Swayman doesn't sign, kiss the season goodbye. And I was just trying to gauge if that's how most people felt because I don't feel that way. Obviously, they're much better with Swayman. The chances go up if with Swayman. Um, but I still think the rest of the roster is good enough where they're still a contending team. And also, what do they do with the cap space that would have gone to Swayman? Now, most players aren't just available right now, so it'd have to be more
No.
later this year. But like they would have money to at the deadline is my point, or throughout the season that they don't have if they pay Swayman. Obviously, I'd rather that money go to Swayman, but you get my point.
So I actually voted no in your poll. So
Some bitch.
because to me, when I hear the word contender, I mean like has a serious chance of winning, not just like, oh, they might steal around here or there.
Mhm.
And you need you need a good goalie to steal series, and that's just a fact. So I don't see them as a serious contender without Swayman. I think they could be a playoff team, but
Yeah.
I'm talking about like this is a team that goes to the final, and I just don't
Mhm.
see it if it's not Swayman. So
And that's totally fair to feel that way, and that's and
I mean,
for
look at the two teams they had the last 2 seasons, especially the last year of Bergeron and Krejci. That team was the definition of a contender, and
yes.
it had 2 good goalies, and it didn't make it. So
But every season's a different story though, right? Like that year, they had all the talent in the world, but they were so far ahead of the pack. I remember saying at the time, there was the Panthers got into some sort of brawl with the Senators. I remember tweeting it out saying, "Don't look now, but if the Bruins draw the Panthers in the first round, it's going to be a tough matchup because they've been playing playoff hockey for months."
yeah,
And the Bruins were coasting their way to a 130 plus point season. Oh, by the way, they had some injuries. DeBrusque was out, Forbert was out, Taylor Hall was out, Foligno was out. Then they get the deadline acquisitions, and none of them played together until like the last game of the playoffs. So there was believe it or not, there was a chemistry issue despite all the talent. Last year, they had the goaltending and they didn't have the talent up front. So it was a different team. I think this year, I think outside of goaltending, I think their roster is Elias Lindholm a top number 1 center in the league? No, but there's only a couple of those, right? He's good enough. And yes, they're a good a scoring winger shy, I believe. But for me, Bridget, look around the conference. Who really, besides Florida, who's probably going to be tired? Toronto, who's never proven it. The Rangers, yes, they're there, but I just think the Bruins wouldn't be alone as far as contending teams that need something. Obviously, I want
the
to make
need
them,
it shouldn't be a need. It's so crazy. Like
and
it
that's
shouldn't
yeah,
be a need. The money's there for it. You had the guy. Like it should be something you feel really like almost your most comfortable position. I know defense too. Like
yeah,
those should be things that you feel really confident about. But I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not 100% confident that Corpusalo is gonna make enough of a turnaround. I think he'll be better than in Ottawa, but I'm not sure yet about the frustration that I guess in Boston haven't felt
Mm.
for a while because goaltending has been what it is with, the best goalie duo and even before that, Tuca and, it could be a
Timmy
different
Thomas,
situation. And by the way, Boston
Razor.
fans not usually very nice to the goalies if they
No.
are at fault for, a bad goal every game or more.
Yeah.
And Korpisalo gave up 2 goals in 25 seconds. Not saying they're both on him, but there was one where the rebound probably could have gotten covered and wouldn't ended up in Byfield poking in the rebound. So, and then the very last goal, I believe, was the one that it snuck right by the arm. He didn't slide over, or he didn't seal the post in time, and it was like, you know what? That's a goal that guys have at a lot of levels. That's a goal that I watched get saved in college hockey. So there's
Mm.
reason for concern, in my opinion, that it's
Yeah.
going to be too much of a drop off to overcome unless Corpusalo really steps up from what he has been.
Yeah, and look, I can't argue with that. Like, am I being optimistic, saying I still think they could contend without Swayman? Yeah, I mean, I think there's levels to it. They're not like the top contenders without him. Then they're certainly not as much of a contender without him. But is the rest of the roster good enough? And that's why it's annoying. It's like this shouldn't even be a question.
No.
Are the Bruins contenders without Swayman? Swayman should be here, and like first of all, he's an RFA, so you're not going anywhere unless the Bruins trade your rights. And it's like, are you willing to sit out a whole year? Are you willing to sit out, like, what's going to happen next year? Like, it's just so stupid. The offers that we now know are out there. It's buddy, just figure it out. Swallow your pride, and not pride. Swallow your ego, and
Similar.
just like yeah, but like yeah, maybe, but like just nobody's like to earlier comments, like no one's been insulting him to the point that they say he is. They've showed believability all off season, and it's just get to camp, just get to camp, and that's the problem too, because when he does, if he does sign, when he does sign, how good is he going to be because of all these distractions, and he's going to get caught up to speed. Like, I just wish this was all ironed out far before training camp.
Yeah.
But here we go.
Yeah, it's not a great recipe for early season success.
Mm-mm.
I think that's one way to put it.
There are significant question marks, right? Outside of goal, like I said earlier off the top, like Marchand's coming off surgeries and hasn't played much in the preseason. Who is their winger? Lindholm has to get acclimated to the Bruins system, and it's not
Patras question mark right now.
Patras a question mark. So as much as I love their defense and their bottom 6 forwards, even if Patra's on the shelf for a little bit, there's too many question marks with some of the key positions where it is. I have no idea where my prediction is going to be on Monday, Bridget, because if there is if there is no Swayman, I'm probably leaning towards like a wild card team. If there is Swayman, I'm probably leaning towards winning the division. So time will tell. But I think at this point,
that's a big difference.
Yeah, it is.
That's a big difference.
It is.
Some years it's not as big, but some years that's several games difference between how much you got to win, like point wise. But
honestly, I feel like I'd rather them win a division or finish wild card because, I guess if you finish wild card, there's no guarantee you avoid your division still. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I would like to see them play the Metro Division in some way, shape, or form in round 1, not Florida. Even though they have Toronto's number, I always feel like every dog has their day, right? And
their best case scenario might be, hope to catch Toronto a little bit later and see if they're beaten down by then or what's going on. But yeah, I want to resurface something that Pierre said about Korpisalo. I've been thinking about because he was in the Ottawa Senators organization when they were making those decisions. So I just want to I want to revisit that. I might post it on Twitter because he didn't have super nice things to say about Korpisalo. So I might grab that and post that soon.
Yeah, you should. Yeah. Pierre also mentioned how Zadorov is might take to coaching here and there in the past, not as smoothly, not in like a defiant type of way. Just like sometimes it takes a little bit to get, to drill it home for him, but he's looked good in camp too. So he wasn't super high on him.
Though. He was very high on Kastelic.
He was, and
Yeah.
he's, I mentioned Koepke a few times. I mean, I would say Kastelic has been the other guy who's had the best camp in Boston so far this preseason, just start to finish, like a couple goals, couple fights, engaged every shift.
And when we
yeah,
talked to Pierre, we were really just asking about the Allmark trade. We weren't even talking about it in the context we are now, that he's going to be your starter for, looks like, at least a week or more, as many as a few months, but we weren't talking about it in that context. So, he still was hesitant to say that this was a good idea for Boston to bring him in.
Yeah. Well, time will tell. And the other part of that package turned out to be Dean Letourneau, and he's going to be starting at BC. I would imagine this week, right, Bridget, is when their season starts?
They're this weekend. And the men's side starts a little bit later. So some of the Hockey East men's teams don't start until next week. But
for those curious, I know there was some who said Letourneau might start out in maybe BC's fourth line, or maybe their extra forward.
They got him on the new Bruins line.
Bruins line. I think he's penciled in as second line center right now.
Yeah, with Gasto and Jelvik. So
yep,
those are two other Bruins prospects. It'd be interesting.
Yeah. And Bridget, just one last comment too. The injury bug this preseason has been Macklin Celebrini was the latest one to go down. Obviously, the last night the Bruins played the Kings. Drew Doughty's out for a little bit. There's numerous big names in the NHL that are going to be on the shelf for at least a month plus to start this regular season based off of training camp. So it's kind of it's tough, right? Because training camp is meant to get people into shape and to get them acclimated to, giving and taking hits again and the timing and stuff, but so that they don't get hurt in the regular season right away. And then I don't know, it's just unfortunate.
Yeah, some people who aren't going to make teams take runs and they try to make an impact, and they're going out of their way to maybe do something dangerous because they're trying to make a statement. And so that's where you see that happen. Poor Stutzel got nailed.
Yeah.
And
that was more premeditated because who was it on Montreal that got hit earlier in the game? Kirby Doc got hit by somebody up high, so the Canadians were responding. But yeah, that's a great point. That's why training camp is kind of dangerous or preseason games, because it's a combination of established NHLers just trying to get their reps back versus guys that are trying to make the league, which is their life's long work, right? And their future. And so, oftentimes they're trying to make an impression, to your point, and the guys that they're hitting are kind of unsuspecting because they're not as geared up. Then, you know what I mean? They're just out for a skate. Yeah,
exactly. They know they're safely making the team whether or not they have a good game or not. So it's a different pace.
Yeah, they're probably not expecting it as much.
No.
But okay, Bridget, good episode. Hopefully Scott's halfway to Boston by now to get to practice. I think they're practicing at noon, by the way, so he left pretty early for that.
I mean, sometimes you got to get there early. Sometimes guys skate before.
Yeah, the extra guys and stuff.
Who's skating before and whatnot. So
yeah. All right. Well, Bridget, thank you. Thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you on Monday with our season predictions. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.